Thank you for joining us here on Indivisible. I'm your host, John Stubbins. We're thrilled to have you with us, America. This is the show where we put God first and also our family and our country, and we will always tell you the truth. We're streaming, as always, on Spreely.com, FrankSpeech.com, Pure Social TV, Facebook, Pill.net, Foxhole app, Cloud Hub, PatriotTV.live, YouTube, and Twitter. And again, we're going to be soon adding MAGAinfo.tv and also Truth Social as we move on. We're building a new website, so just bear with us as we do that. We want to wean ourselves off of big tech, and we're working on that every day to get that done. I'm working with a great team, and we're excited about bringing you that. So, as always, go to stubbins.org, and you can subscribe for free. Click the notifications bell so that you get updates for the show. Once we get the new website out, then we'll give you that, and you won't have to rely on big tech anymore. Now, real quick shout out again. I want to thank Mike Lindell, our sponsor, for his delivery of pillows up to the border, the Canadian truckers. God bless him for doing that. And as you know, we have huge specials on all MyPillow products. Use Indivisible as your promo code. You can also call my 1-800 number, which is 1-800-716-4639. And you can use Indivisible there. So you can call in, or you can go to the website, your choice, mypillow.com. So I want to get right to it. We've got an amazing guest today. So I want you to imagine, America, you're sitting, at the kitchen table having lunch, you're driving to work, you're at the amusement park with your kids, and all of a sudden everything stops. An EMP attack, the power grid goes out, a nuclear missile hits America, maybe in a city that you're in. Can you imagine what you would do? What would you do? Would you be able to survive? Do you have food? Do you have water? Do you have shelter in the case of an EMP attack? What do you think would happen to the population if we had an EMP attack, or the power grid went out, or one of our nuclear sites was attacked? A lot of people don't think about this. I'm sure you probably hear about people that do the super prepping, and they build underground homes. They've stocked up on water and filled kits for food so that they can feed themselves and their family. They're armed just in case something happens. Well, that's real, and that threat is real. And we're going to have an amazing guest on the show today. Dr. Peter Pry will be coming on. But before I bring on Dr. Pry, I want to read something that Dr. Pry has written that is amazing. It is called The Doom of Nato. And just bear with me. In 1914, a single bullet fired into the chest of Archduke Ferdinand by a Serbian terrorist quickly and unexpectedly exploded into World War I. The Austro-Hungarians mobilized their armies to punish Serbia. Russia mobilized armies to defend their Serb little Slavic brother. Germany mobilized, then France, then Britain, and by 1918, there were 40 million casualties, 15 to 22 million dead. Now, current day, President Biden's ill-conceived efforts to save Ukraine from Russia invasion could spark a much larger conflict. I know that's hard to believe, but perhaps even nuclear, World War III. And you have to think about that, especially with this guy in the Oval Office, because he's cognitively not there, and obviously not right in the brain. After years of denial, Washington seems to finally understand, as a result of the ongoing Ukrainian crisis, that Russia and China really are allies, prepared to coordinate aggression against Europe, Asia, and America. Russia's strategic interest in Ukraine in 2022 are far greater than were Russian strategic interests in Serbia in 1914. Ukrainian entry into NATO, official or de facto, Russia perceives as an existential threat. As NATO missiles, air forces, and armies advanced to eastern Ukraine, would be only 300 miles from Moscow, within easy striking distance for a surprise attack. Ukrainian territory is traversed by Russian petroleum pipelines that are a major source of Moscow's revenue. Ukraine, according to Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, is Russia's Slavic brother, and as part of the former USSR, belongs in a new Russian empire. Ukraine, if annexed by Russia, will enable Moscow to move its missiles, air forces, and armies into Western Ukraine and Belarus, along the entire eastern border of NATO member Poland, posing a steel spearhead that could knife through NATO to the English Channel, as the USSR threatened to do during the Cold War. Now, Russia's strategic interest in Ukraine, a combination of legitimate defensive concerns and illegitimate aggressive designs, far outweigh NATO's political will or military capability to defend Ukraine. Just as in 1914, perhaps more so, the escalatory possibilities of the 2022 Ukrainian crisis are limitless. By design or miscalculation, Russia's invasion of Ukraine could become an invasion of NATO. China, North Korea, and Iran could seize the day and launch wars against Taiwan, South Korea, and Israel. War games by the U.S. Defense Department and RAND show that Russia can overrun Ukraine and the frontline NATO states in Eastern Europe in 72 hours. Okay? That's pretty fast. That's faster than Hitler did with Poland in 1939. RAND analysis finds a Russian invasion of NATO's Baltic states cannot be defeated even if the U.S. resorts to tactical nuclear weapons. Russia has an overwhelming advantage in tactical nuclear weapons, an estimated 2,000 to 8,000 warheads versus 180 U.S. warheads. Moreover, Russian nuclear warheads are more technologically advanced, designed for ultra-low yields for use by land, sea, and air forces, specialized effects like neutrons, X-rays, and electromagnetic pulse, EMP, and clean, so they produce no radioactive fallout. Russian nuclear weapons are not only a deterrent, but militarily practical for use on the battlefield. President Biden's strategy to deter Russian invasion by massively arming Ukraine is playing with nuclear fire. I couldn't agree more. Moscow may use Washington's arming of Kiev as a pretext to invade not only Ukraine, but bordering and nearby NATO states that are also supplying arms in order to isolate Ukraine and expand Russia's defensive frontiers. President Biden has sent a few thousand troops to supplement the 8,500 troops spread out along NATO's eastern border in penny packets. These are intended to deter invasion of NATO by the 130,000 Russian troops massed on Ukraine's border, backed by the Russian army, numbering over 1 million. The U.S. military presence is no practical defense of NATO. In a conventional war, the U.S. and its NATO allies would be overwhelmed. U.S. forces deployed in Eastern Europe and on Ukraine's border are a tripwire to deter Russia from invading NATO by the threat of nuclear escalation. Yet, nuclear escalation is Russia's strategic forte. Russia could win World War III in Europe with a single super EMP nuclear warhead. detonated 70 kilometers high over NATO headquarters in Brussels, the EMP field would black out electrical grids and paralyze NATO military forces from Poland to Britain, making a red carpet for Russian invasion. U.S. troops and 30,000 civilians fleeing Ukraine would become POWs. Russian tanks could reach the English Channel in days. After the EMP attack, the U.S. would discover it has no tactical nuclear weapons. Even if some delivery systems survive the EMP, it is highly unlikely any host European government would allow a tactical nuclear strike against Russia from its territory, fearing nuclear retaliation. Russia may be able to destroy NATO without World War III, and it is already in the process of fracturing NATO with the Ukrainian crisis. Germany, European NATO strongman, let's say, is being lambasted for refusing to send arms to Ukraine, allegedly because of German dependence on Russian natural gas. However, maybe Berlin fears stoking war in Ukraine because the last century Berlin was on the losing side of 2 world wars. Maybe Germany remembers its destroyed cities being raped and occupied by Russia, remembers its 5 to 7 million dead. You hope they remember. President Biden should end the Ukrainian crisis by promising NATO will not include Ukraine or expand eastward. 2, try making Russia a strategic partner or neutral in the new Cold War with China. 3, catch up with Russian nuclear weapon capabilities. The bear, friend or foe, respects only strength. Where have I heard that before? President Ronald Reagan and President Donald Trump. This was written by Dr. Peter Vincent Pry. He's an executive director of the Task Force on National and Homeland Security. He served as chief of staff of the Congressional EMP Commission, director of the U.S. Nuclear Strategy Forum, and on the staffs of the Congressional Strategic Posture Commission, House Armed Service Committee, and the CIA. I want to welcome onto the show Dr. Peter Vincent Pry. How you doing, sir?
Thank you so much for having me.
Sorry that took so long to read.
Not at all. You read it well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think it's important for people to understand that and know what we're up against and understand the ramifications, the consequences, what could take place. And in my opening, I wanted to talk about the possibilities of an American, again, sitting at their lunch table with their family, or maybe they're on their way to Disney World or the movie theater, or maybe they're on their way to work and an EMP strike happens, or the power grid goes out. Then what?
Yes, those things are real possibilities, and that's one of the reasons I wrote that article. And I've written other articles in the past trying to warn. I mean, Washington, the Biden administration, even Republican members of Congress, I think, don't understand the escalatory implications of this. I mean, yes. That's why I started off with the story about Serbia in World War I. Little Serbia, the powder keg of the Balkans, it was called. Well, Ukraine is an enormous powder keg,
right?
Of France, and it's and the stakes for Russia are existential. The assumption that we can get them to back off, and the appalling thing, and I think it's another sign. I mean, people have talked about the incompetence in Afghanistan, and that may be one of the reasons Biden is talking tough on Ukraine, is because he doesn't want to suffer the political damage from being blamed for another Afghanistan.
Right.
But in my assessment, as a person who's worked in the national security area all my life, he's already committed something that's worse than Afghanistan by putting us at risk in this way, because the United States has no strategic interests in Ukraine. They're not a member of NATO. It's perfectly understandable why the Russians are concerned about Ukraine joining NATO. You know, most Americans have never heard of the Partnership for Peace. This is an interim step toward becoming a member of NATO. And we foolishly, I think, let Ukraine into the Partnership for Peace. And all of the former territories of the Soviet Union, which don't already belong to NATO, the Baltic states were former Soviet territory, and they are in NATO now. But Tajikistan and Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan are all members of the Partnership for Peace. You know, one should never promise to go to nuclear war for a country you can't even find on a map. And we never should have expanded NATO eastward in the first place. When I was on the House Armed Services Committee, when I was a young man, I had the portfolio for NATO enlargement, and I advised the late great Floyd Spence, who was the chairman of that committee, and they sent me to all of these countries in Eastern Europe that are now members of NATO, and my job was to meet with them. What would they bring into NATO? How prepared are they to defend themselves? You know, is it going to be worthwhile for the United States to expand NATO eastward? And I told Chairman Spence, and I have to say, as an aside, meeting those people, I mean, it wrings your heart. These people looked to the United States. They had suffered so much under communism. You know, it was really hard to look at this with a cold-eyed strategic perspective. You know, because you want to help these people. You want to help rescue these people. You don't want to have happen to them what happened to them after Yalta in World War II. You know, but
yes, sir.
If you're looking at America's interests, you know, and not at larger humanitarian interests, it was really bad, unwise, and I think unethical for us to have expanded NATO eastwards. Not only did we never give a nuclear guarantee to defend a country with nuclear war for a country we can't find on a map, but you shouldn't be promising defend countries that you're not capable of defending. You know, we can't project, and as we're discovering now, there's no way that NATO and the United States can project enough power into Eastern Europe to defend even the countries that are currently members of NATO.
Sure.
You know, we can't defend the Baltic states. We can't defend Poland and Hungary and Romania. If the Russians decided to invade those countries, they would win. Our own war games show that, you know, so no vital U.S. strategic interest is served by bringing them into NATO. So what's the solution? You know, wiser heads, you know, back in the Reagan administration and then the Bush administration, you know, Washington looking to the future when the Soviet Union collapsed and the Warsaw Pact went away, and you had this brief shining moment of where Russia was led by Boris Yeltsin,
right,
and his democratic reformers, and they were looking to join the West. You know, then Washington's view was, we don't want Russia to be an enemy. We want to make them a strategic partner so that they don't become a revanchist nuclear superpower, eager to take revenge against the West at some time in the future. And that view, unfortunately, the opportunity to do that, the best opportunity to do that was during the 8 years of the Clinton administration, which was completely bungled by Clinton.
Yes,
Clinton,
sir.
Advised by socialists. Strobe Talbot was his point man for Russia. Strobe Talbot was a personal friend of Khrushchev, you know, and all the money that we spent to try to rebuild Russia along democratic reform lines was given to the nomenclatura, these ex-Soviet officials, all right, who were now in charge of the Russian bureaucracy, and it ended, hundreds of millions of dollars of it ended up in Swiss bank accounts, and the Russian people got nothing. In fact, they got worse than nothing, because in effect what you had was the rise of a Russian mafia.
Right.
People's savings disappeared, and in their minds, to the average Russian, they'd say, "Is this what democracy and free enterprise is about?" You know, this is what the communists had warned them that free enterprise and democracy was about, that it was being at the mercy of the mafia, basically. Yeah. And that's not true, of course. We know that free enterprise and freedom is the best way is the best thing for the people.
Best disinfectant.
Experience. and it thanks to Bill Clinton, and it ended up rolling out the red carpet for the rise of the dictatorship of Vladimir Putin, and then it was a bipartisan failure. George Bush, foolishly decided, he was so preoccupied with the war on terrorism that it was almost an afterthought. Oh yeah, let's expand NATO to the east. I had a heart-to-heart with Chairman Spence on that when I came back from my many trips to Eastern Europe, and I said, sir, we ought not to do this. These East European countries, they're economically bankrupt. Their militaries are really backward. They can't defend themselves. They're going to be counting on us to carry the whole burden of their defense, just like Western Europe is now. And and it will inevitably, if you want a new Cold War and possibly a nuclear war, then expand NATO to the east. That's what's going to result. It's going to be inevitable. And Chairman Spencer actually agreed with me. We had a couple of hearings on this, on the threats from this. But in the end of the day, he said, Peter, the political momentum behind expanding NATO eastward is just so great that we can't overcome it just us. And we were alone. Chairman Spence and a few of us on the House Armed Services Committee, we couldn't withstand the bureaucratic momentum that was coming out of the Department of State and the White House and even the Department of Defense. There was this, people don't understand it now, but we were still in the euphoria of having won the Cold War. And you may remember there were books being written like Francis Fukuyama's The End of History. And in effect, what Fukuyama was arguing was that the long struggle between freedom and democracy had finally been resolved in our favor, in the favor of freedom, with the collapse of the Soviet Union. And that in the future, all other countries were going to be looking to the American model.
Right.
And we're really optimistic, excessively optimistic now. In retrospect, people can see this, but not at the time. People really thought, everybody's going to want to get on board with the American model and become democratically free and economically free. And so don't worry about Russia. If they cling to their old ways, they'll never rise up as a great power again. So we can do this safely and we'll never have to pay any consequences. And, and so we will never have to pay the piper, or they will just see how good Eastern Europe is doing. And then they will join the party and become a free economic system themselves. And how things change so quickly, now we face not just Russia, but an alliance between Russia and China, North Korea and Iran. Washington now understands, and I've been saying it for years, and so have others, that Russia and China have been strategic partners and have a real alliance that's every bit as unified as NATO. I think more so. For over a decade, China's a superpower today because it was built on Russian technology. They exercise together. They've played war games where they jointly practice nuclear wars against the United States.
It's like the Axis of Evil Part 2.
Yes. This is a more formidable combination. Now, what Washington doesn't still get is that North Korea and Iran are client states of Russia and China, and they're part of the new axis. Call it the new axis of evil. Okay, and and this is the most formidable block of power, military and economic power, that we have ever faced as a country, and the free world has ever faced in its history. It's more dangerous to us. Even little North Korea is more dangerous to us than Nazi Germany was in World War II or Imperial Japan. They have hydrogen bombs and ICBMs that can reach any city in the United States or any of our military bases. And Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan could not project power. They didn't have mass.
They got close. They were close, but they would have had another year or so, probably.
Yes. So this is the thing, and Ukraine is a powder keg that could blow all this up in unpredictable ways. And the Biden administration has put us right in the middle of it for no good reason, because we don't have any vital strategic interest in Ukraine. And if you really were interested in protecting Ukrainian sovereignty, The best way to have done that was by doing what President Trump wanted to do.
Right.
The Trump policy was to hit the reset button again with Russia so that we could try to make them a strategic partner.
That's right.
Our single most important foreign policy interest should be to divide the Sino-Russian alliance, to pull Russia into our sphere, or at least get them to be neutral, so that China will not be as formidable an adversary as they are. You've got China with its over 1 billion people population, a huge army, rapidly developing nuclear capabilities, a navy that's bigger and more powerful than ours is, even though they don't have aircraft carriers. They have asymmetrical advantages in other things.
Sure.
Russia, which is the world's greatest nuclear power. This is a formidable bloc, and they know it, which is why they're being so aggressive against.
And Biden didn't do us any favors by helping Russia on the energy pipeline. That's for sure.
Right. That's right. So our best bet is, and we could use this crisis still to try to achieve a strategic partnership with Russia, or maybe make Russia neutral. All we have to do, the Russians offered a peace treaty before all of this began that had 6 points on it. And the first point was, do not bring Ukraine into NATO, and do not or expand NATO further eastward.
Right.
I think if we gave Russia that first point and said, okay, we're going to promise not to bring Ukraine into NATO, and we are not going to expand NATO eastward, that is more in our interests even than Russia's interests. It's something we should easily be able to do.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. And by the way, real quick, I just want to throw something in there. President Trump, he went over this time and time again about all these different countries in Europe that aren't holding up their end of the bargain. Okay, they're not helping us. They're you look at their GDP. What are they addressing regarding protection of their countries? Like you said, they expect us to do everything. We can't do everything.
Right. All these globalists in Atlanta, and this is why they don't get it. This is why our policy is being so badly mismanaged. It's because they don't have American national interests in mind. The decision on what we're doing relationship to Ukraine, which is the same thing for all the wars we've been fighting recently, and all of our foreign policy is driven by globalism.
Yes, sir.
By the globalist elites in Washington. They think nationalism is evil. They are willing to sacrifice America, its economy, its military, in order to achieve their vision of a world that's a global world, the global citizen, where nations have lost their significance, or at least there's some supranational entity. The United Nations is an example of that. Okay, where differences between nations will be settled by international law and international courts, and in their minds, even if it means sacrificing the United States vital interests, the achievement of this larger goal will be worth it in the end. But they think that the American patriot, the troglodytes that are the American people in their minds, the unsophisticated ones, will never be able to understand that and will not support it. And so they make false appeals to patriotism and to the idea of defending Ukrainian democracy, for example, as being in our interest. And this has been done for all of the wars we've been fighting recently that haven't advanced American interests in any way. That's because they know they're not advancing American interests. To their minds, people also often ask, well, why were we in Afghanistan for so long? And why the war in Iraq? The idea of sovereignty, the notion that everybody has got to respect the sovereignty of every country, in the mind of the globalist, is a vital interest to globalism. Other countries have to be taught the lesson that you can't violate the sovereignty of another country by using military force or terrorism. And so America has to be the global policeman, no matter what it costs us.
I know.
To go out and protect their sovereignty.
Yeah, and it's just ridiculous.
They go beyond that. Some of it is so, frankly, sick. not only this sort of Wilsonian idealism, because that's what it really is. It's called different things, but it goes back to Woodrow Wilson and his vision of the League of Nations and all the rest.
Right.
But they also believe in transmitting the secular humanist values of globalism around the world. Hence, in Afghanistan, the Defense Department was, spending millions of dollars, to on women's studies and to try to raise up a generation of Afghan women and girls who have with the values of New York City, okay, as if they could be comfortable living in New York City. It isn't known, but one of the things I found out and that I brought back and told Mr. Spence about it, but we couldn't do anything about it, is that our European partners, when we expanded NATO to the east, our European partners were requiring as a condition of their entry into NATO that they adopt European Union standards on human rights when it came to the LGBT community. Now, I guess I should be calling that the LGBT community or whatever the heck it is. But these were traditional societies.
Right.
They were very traditional societies. They were much more religious than the secular West. They didn't believe in gay marriage and all of this other stuff that is now so popular in the West.
Right.
But America, we're putting our lives on the lines and putting American money, because America, as Trump said, we're the primary engine of NATO.
That's right.
Most of NATO, and they were using that to advance the left-wing liberal sick agenda on sexual identity and gender identity and everything as a condition of these countries coming into NATO. What a terrible thing. They feared communism so much, though, that they were willing to do it. And now maybe they've backpedaled on those things. I hope so. In Poland and Hungary and places like that. But a lot goes on that the American people don't know about, that these globalists that are running are foreign.
Right. And not only that, their evil intentions. And they take someone that's weak. Neville Chamberlain comes to mind. Peace in our time, right? How did that go? He thought that he had Hitler, by the horns, but Hitler had him by the horns. Real quick, we're going to take a quick break, but I want to just state this again. The Doom of Nato. The Doom of Nato, written by Dr. Peter Vincent Pry. It'll be in the Washington Times. So, you can read it there, or you can just listen to today's show, and I read it for you. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back with Dr. Pry, I want to get into the power grid, the EMP strikes, making it, idiot and dummy proof, hardening our nuclear sites, the water supply, all of that. We'll be right back with Dr. Pry. God bless you for joining us. Big news, America. Mike is bringing back the pillow offer for just $29.98. They're the softest pillows. They don't go flat. Wash them and dry them as many times as you like, and they still keep their shape. And they're made in America. Mike is offering his premium My Pillows at his lowest price ever. Queen size for $29.98, regularly $69.98. That's a $40 savings. And king size, only $5 more. Go to mypillow.com and enter the promo code INDIVISIBLE for my show. Or call 1-800-716-4639 and give them the code INDIVISIBLE for my show, and you're going to get huge savings. We're back with Dr. Pry. Dr. Pry, by the way, folks, I just want to let you know, I've had it scrolling since the beginning of when we first introduced Dr. Pry, but I've got his information scrolling at the bottom so that you can connect, so that you can get involved and join us in doing something about this. We don't have to live with this, and Dr. Pry will get into some of that in just a minute. But again, we do not have to live with this. we can do something about it. It's not too late, but we need to do it now. And there's a a simple fix, then there's a much more expansive fix on hardening those targets. But we, like you said, I don't know if it was on Tucker Carlson or if it was on Mark Levin's show, but I heard you talk about it, making it dummy proof, idiot proof, hardening those nuclear sites, and the cost in doing it and protecting our power grid in the low billions versus a little bit more. And I wanted you to maybe hit on some of that, because the American people need to understand that it's not too late, that we can do something, and we need them to back this and get involved and join us in the effort to do something about it, rather than just sit on our hands on the sidelines and do nothing, especially when you have someone like Biden in the White House. And by the way, the website is emptaskforce.us. That's emptaskforce.us. Go ahead, Doctor.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, there's really no excuse for the United States to be vulnerable to this new form of warfare that I call blackout warfare, that can be inflicted by cyber attacks, by EMP attacks, by physical sabotage, by a surprisingly small number of people that would be required in order to black out a grid. You can cause a blackout and win a blackout war against the United States by any of these means. Russia, China, North Korea, Iran plan to do them in combination. The EMP Commission came up with a plan back in 2008 that would have protected the bulk power system, basically the backbone of the American electric grid, for as little as $2 to $4 billion.
Right.
At the time, that's what we were giving away every year in foreign aid to Pakistan.
I know.
If we suspended that aid for just 1 year and spent it on defending the American people,
yes,
it would have been a giant step toward decreasing our vulnerability. Now, that plan assumed smart planning would be done by the U.S. government and by the electric utilities, that in addition to actually hardening transformers and generators in the bulk power system, that they would do other things and be prepared with spares to come back and quickly bring the grid back. So that is still the most cost-effective plan that anybody has come up with. Others, and I would support this plan too. There was an organization that came up with a Foundation for Resilient Societies that had Dr. George Baker. He is one of the nation's foremost EMP experts too, and he served on the EMP Commission. And he came up with another plan that would have cost $20 to $30 billion, much more than the EMP Commission plan. But this plan is based on, shall we say, and many of your listeners might agree with this, this plan assumes that you have no confidence in the government bureaucracy and no confidence in the utilities to make a smart plan, and
right,
would harden everything to military standards so that it would be what we called idiot-proofed.
yes,
So that if the government failed us and the utilities failed us and they didn't do the right things, it wouldn't matter. It would be hardened to the military standards so that we wouldn't even know the EMP attack had happened. Just the way we don't know lightning strikes happen, which happen all the time, but the grid is already hardened against that natural form of EMP called lightning. So those are examples of what can be done. What I most would like your listeners to know is that this problem doesn't have to be solved from Washington, and I don't think we should expect that Washington is going to solve the problem, even though Biden has continued President Trump's EMP executive order, and Biden does deserve credit. I mean, he's the first president that's actually investing hundreds of millions of dollars in EMP protection for the electric grid. But what he's giving with one hand, he's more than taking away with the other.
Exactly.
To spend $55 billion on provisions to defend us against climate change, which is a real threat. And the climate change things include things like shutting down coal-fired plants, building vast solar and wind farms that will be then hooked into the big grid. The little bit that they're spending on EMP protection is more than taken away and overcompensated by these really stupid acts, because the sun doesn't shine all the time. The wind doesn't always blow. This will destabilize the big grid and make it, on balance, even more vulnerable to EMP and cyber attacks.
No doubt.
Just look at what happened in Texas. The first things that went were the solar and wind, and they destabilized the Texas grid when an ice storm hit. An ice storm isn't nearly as big a threat as a cyber attack.
And we can't depend on this administration, and there have been many others. We can't depend on them to do their job, because we know that their ideologies, whether it be Marxism or communism or socialism or whatever it is they want to bring to the United States, a lot of these people, they're trying to destroy us from within, whether it be Islamic Jihad, whether it be Marxism in our schools, teaching CRT, our southern border, which is a serious threat. We've been covering that ad nauseum because of how important that is. And, look, there are terrorists coming through that southern border. Some we've caught, some we haven't. What that number is, who knows? But we're covering it, and we're going to be embedded in that border for a long time, because we cannot trust this administration to do the job. We just can't.
Right. And even past this administration, I wonder how much, even if we are lucky to get enough to get another president like President Trump in there. All right. The fact of the matter is, President Trump was undermined and sabotaged by his own government. You have these bureaucrats. I think one of the things that was a wake-up call to the American people, and one of the best things that was accomplished by President Trump, it wasn't purposely that he didn't plan to accomplish this, but I think we all could see that even when you win the political struggle, and even if you get a Republican Congress and a Republican Senate and a Republican president who's fundamentally a conservative, you really haven't won the battle.
Nope.
Because there's this new thing, which is what the founders were really afraid of, is this new aristocracy in the federal government, the bureaucracy, that can outlast presidents and outlast Congresses, and thinks it knows better than EMP commissions.
And many of them are on the take.
Yeah, they have their own agenda. And they'll say, yeah, we're obeying the law, we're obeying your executive order, but they really aren't. For example, in response to President Trump's EMP executive order, all it resulted in is these guys doing endless meetings and conferences and writing another report, spending lots of money to their friends in the Beltway bandits made a lot of money off of it, but not one thing being done to actually harden the grid, which is what was intended by that executive order.
It's baffling. It's just baffling to me, Doctor.
I publish a progress report, a book-length progress report called "Will America Be Protected?" And I'm in the process now. In March, before March 26th, I will publish the third progress report, because it's been 3 years since President Trump signed that executive order that describes the lack of progress that they have made, and how the threat is growing even as we make no progress. It's called "Will America Be Protected?" and it's going to be available on Amazon.com. And to lay out the sad story. But what do we do about it, since you can't trust the government, regardless of which party seems to be in charge on these things? You can do about it something about it at the state level. Another book I wrote years ago, I think it was 5 years ago now, it was called Blackout Wars. It's different. My new book is Blackout Warfare, but this old book, Blackout Wars, wasn't even really written chiefly by me. It was written by heroic state senators and state representatives who tried to pass legislation to protect their states against EMP. And most cases, they were defeated because the utility lobbyists would come in and stop the bills from going through. But if you can overcome that resistance by the lobbies, Senator Bob Hall, I have to salute him, Texas State Senator Bob Hall, tried again in this past legislative year to protect Texas from EMP and cyber warfare, and came close to doing it because of the demonstrate the snowstorm, which killed
Sure.
over 100 Texans, proved that the utilities in Texas cannot be trusted to
They
protect
weren't happy.
even against a snowstorm, let alone against cyber and EMP. Unfortunately, his bill didn't make it. What wasn't enacted into law. I keep hoping that whoever this governor of Texas is, whether it's Governor Abbott or somebody in the future, will do it by executive order.
I tell you what, I hope, to be honest with you, I hope it's Colonel West, because I know Colonel West will start to do something on that border. I know he understands EMP. I know he understands the threat to our grid, nuclear, even our water supply. And by the way, and this is very important because, and I don't want to scare people, but they need to understand what the consequences are. Tell the audience, what would happen if that power grid went down, or if there was an EMP attack, or that nuclear site is taken out. What happens to the American people? They need to know.
Well, the EMP Commission, this isn't just my opinion, but we looked at that and analyzed what would happen if we had a nationwide blackout, whether it was from EMP or cyber warfare or physical sabotage, a nationwide blackout that lasted a year. And if it was an EMP, it'd probably last forever, because we calculated that up to 90% of the American people could perish from starvation, disease, societal collapse. And if that happens, you're not coming back from that. I mean, that's basically the doom of your civilization.
No water.
Right. No, that's one of the things that first happens. You'll have no water. The food supply in the local grocery stores is only enough for about 72 hours to feed people for about 2 or 3 days at normal consumption rates.
Right.
The food will begin to spoil in the big regional food warehouses that supply the groceries.
No refrigeration.
Immediately, the refrigeration fails, temperature control systems, the transportation system won't work because so many of the automobiles will be knocked out by an EMP. Refrigerated trucks and things like that won't work. That is necessary to provide food. The nuclear reactors, we have 100 nuclear power reactors in this country. None of them are protected against EMP. In 7 days, the emergency generators that they have in the batteries will run out, and they'd go Fukushima, spreading radioactivity everywhere. A colleague of mine, Ambassador Henry Cooper, and a good friend, is leading something called the Lake Wiley Project with Duke Energy, to try to harden a nuclear reactor. And it's not that hard to harden a nuclear reactor. It can be done easily. And if the Lake Wiley Project is followed as an example, we could harden all of those nuclear power reactors and turn them into an asset instead of a liability.
Gosh, let's pray that it does.
Yeah, they would become islands of survivability. But my most important point here is don't wait for Washington. Get your governor to pass an executive order. Find somebody in your state legislature that will pass a bill that will say, look, we've got to protect the state grid. All the utilities within our state have got to be hardened against EMP and cyber warfare.
Right. And not only that, go to the emptaskforce.us, go to the website and get involved.
Yes, we're looking for volunteers. After I showed up on the Mark Levin show, I was very pleased that we had over 1,000 people volunteer to try to push forward national EMP preparedness in their states. And it can be done. It can be done by one determined individual. I had a Democrat reach out to me. Oh, this was years ago. This was more than 10 years ago. But the first state, because I came up with the idea of going out away from Washington, not waiting for Washington, going to the states. Andrea Boland was a Democrat, a liberal Democrat, but she was very concerned about the EMP threat. And she reached out to me, actually. And I brought my team up there. And the state legislature in Maine had never even heard about EMP. But we talked to them, we briefed them. And while Washington hadn't done anything about the EMP threat for years in that point, in 6 months, we got a bill passed and signed into law by the governor to protect the Maine electric grid from EMP. This was just done by a handful of people, led by one determined senator, Andrea Boland. My hat is off to her. She's still a good friend. You
Yes.
know, this is a nonpartisan kind of an issue.
Yes, sir.
Unfortunately, what
It's a
happened
common
again,
sense issue.
they started making progress toward protecting the main electric grid. Then NERC, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, which is basically the lobby for the electric power industry, brought so much pressure to bear on Central Maine Power in Maine that they stopped it. NERC can fine utilities and use its clout to stop them, because they were afraid that if Maine got protected from EMP, other states would follow their example.
Right.
These utilities don't want to spend any money on EMP.
Who would think that, Doctor?
Right, exactly. So, but you know, we can win this battle if you just stand up to the utility lobbyists and take the initiative. And think of this: if the states reclaim that space. Now, this is me speaking, not the EMP Commission, because what I've been talking to about up to this point is all would have been officially approved by the EMP Commission. But you know, in Peter Pry's view, you know, if the states have the courage to take on this national and homeland security issue and fill this vacuum that's been left by Washington, D.C., then there are a lot of other issues that one might consider less important, like, should we be teaching critical race theory to our children in school? What about our Second Amendment rights? Then the states can seize that high ground too, and maybe we can get back to running our country the way the founders originally envisioned it.
Amen.
You know, Washington was never supposed to become the new Rome. The Federalist Papers are all about how the Constitution, by signing on to the Constitution, the states wouldn't have to worry about their sovereignty being destroyed and taken over by a new Rome in Washington. And unfortunately, that is the problem that's happened, and that's why so much has gone wrong in this country.
Yes,
because
sir.
it's not being run the way the founders envisioned. Most governance was supposed to come out of the states because the states are closer to the people. And this is a way of not only protecting our lives, but saving our freedom by filling that space with the power of the state to take that over.
It's contagious, Doctor.
Yes.
That affects so many other things. Dr. Pry, it's interesting because, you know, I have to give credit to David Padrush, and we always give credit to David. David is Mark Levin's executive producer, and it was David that asked me to start my show. So I've got to give a shout out to David and Mark. God bless them. I hope that I'm doing justice, and 1/4 as good as Mark is. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Dr. Pry in closing. Be right back, folks. We've tried so many of Mike's products at MyPillow. Whether it's the Giza Dream Sheets, the MyPillow mattress topper, or whether it's the MyPillow towel sets. Me and my family here at Indivisible, we've tried all of Mike's great products, and we just love them. My mom loves her robe. Mark loves the big dog bed for Shakespeare. And my favorite, the moccasins, which are really great for my feet. Save up to 66% off for MyPillow products for you and your family. Go to MyPillow.com and enter the promo code Indivisible for my show, or call 1-800-716-4639 and give them the promo code Indivisible for my show. You're going to love it. We're back with Dr. Pry. Doctor, listen, we've only got a couple minutes left, but, you know, what we've talked about today is so critical. It's so important. I'm thrilled that you got those 1,000 volunteers off of that show. And I hope that you'll get many more when this gets out, and we're going to spread the word. And look, I'm an ally, and I'm going to do everything I can to help get the word out. And be a warrior for you out there on this battlefield, because you're right. We cannot depend on the government to do this. I don't believe that they're going to do this. I believe it's up to us to save ourselves and get back to our founding fathers, get back to our Constitution. I agree wholeheartedly with you. I want to turn the floor over to you to give your thoughts to kind of wrap this up and put a bow on, you know, obviously we talked about the consequences that the American people need to understand that can be right at their doorstep at the blink of an eye. And people don't realize how fast this happens. There's not going to be days to try to get it together once it happens. Once it happens, you're in trouble. Like we talked about, no water, no refrigeration. Those cars are going to be shut down. You can forget about phones, internet, TV, gone. So, what are you going to do? Are you stocked up on water? Are you stocked up on food? I mean, I pray to God that it never comes to that. Instead, I hope that we do the right thing and harden these targets, make them idiot proof, spend the money. Like you said, take 1 year off of giving money overseas to people that want to destroy us and spend it here on protecting our infrastructure, on protecting our citizens. Stop people from coming in that border. We've got to do it or we're finished. Go ahead, Doctor.
Right. Well, I obviously agree with you, but we're doing it for our lives and our freedom. Freedom doesn't mean anything if you're dead. And I think while it's hard to come to grips with it, people keep looking to the midterm elections and the next presidential election and saying, "Oh, we'll be able to turn this all around," and get back control of the levers of power. I'm not so sure that's true. As I said before, no matter which party comes to power, I think we're going to be disappointed in Washington because we're in the grips of a civilizational crisis where the way governance happens in this country is so now far removed from the way the founders intended it.
Well, and real quick, Doctor, you've got the deep state, the DOJ, the FBI, Congress itself, probably 75 to 80%. These are all mob. These are all mob. In other words, they're subject under investigation right now.
And they don't do things well anymore.
No.
Dr. Fauci is not unique in Washington. There are thousands of Dr. Faucis.
Absolutely.
That isn't protected from EMP and cyber. They're arrogant. They're ignorant. They don't do their jobs well. If you want to live, don't put your hands in the lives of the Dr. Faucis of cyber warfare and EMP. Seize the day for yourself.
Yes.
It's an opportunity for us to not only take charge of protecting our own lives and our families, but protecting our freedoms as well. By doing it at the state level, sometimes I think even if it could be solved at the level of Washington, I'm not sure I would want it to be solved there because it would become yet another program controlled by the new Rome, which doesn't do anything well. And if you can't do it in your state, maybe you've got a Democrat governor, that is like Dr. Fauci, another incompetent that can't be trusted. Then you can do it in your community.
Right.
Think about your county.
Listen. We have to start winning on the local level again.
Right.
That's one area that we've gotten lost. And people who believe in the Constitution, that believe in our founding documents, the Federalist Papers, they need to start winning and taking over at the local level. We've been talking about that for a long time.
One of our projects, is Rangeley, Colorado. One of our EMP task force members is a town council member in Rangeley, Colorado. And the little town of Rangeley, Colorado, is in the process of protecting itself from EMP. And everybody could do that and should be doing it.
Yes, sir.
Not only will that be safeguarding your life, but when you have control over the process of protecting your life, it also gives you greater control over your freedom.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Dr. Pry, for coming on the show.
Department of Homeland Security to protect us.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. I want to thank you, Doctor, for coming on the show. It was an honor to have you. I hope you'll come back. And listen, folks, go to the website, emptaskforce.us. I can't wait to read your new book, Doctor. I'm sure it's going to be amazing. I'll have you sign it.
Well, I'll be glad to sign Blackout Warfare for you. If you want to know how the bad guys plan to attack us and win World War III, it's Blackout Warfare. It's the first book that lays it out. It's the kind of book that should have been written by us about the German Blitzkrieg and about
Yes,
the
sir.
revolution in military affairs represented by aircraft carriers from the Imperial Japanese Navy. Unfortunately, no such book was written, except in Germany and Japan. Well, Major General J.F.C. Fuller was writing some things, okay? But nobody listened to him.
God bless you, sir. Have an amazing afternoon, and we'll be seeing you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me. And
my pleasure, sir. My honor. God bless you. That was Dr. Vincent Peter Pry. We're so thrilled to have him on the show today, covering a subject that we had to cover that's important, that all of you need to understand, and that you can do something about. You don't have to just take it. You can actually do something about it. So until next time, folks, God bless you. God bless your families, and God bless America.
Yeah.